Good evening. Welcome to the first class on holiday. Still people are coming in. Keep your microphones muted. And you must be feeling a little lazy to join today. No? It's a holiday for banks. So we'll go for the introductions. So someone missed introductions last time. They can introduce themselves. Dhammika Jayasinghe or Dhammika Jayasinghe. Have you introduced yourself? Claudette Rajaratna. Okay, maybe today holiday you may not be in your official dress, but next time if you don't introduce yourself, your marks will be reduced. Okay. Now, last time, the last 10 minutes we discussed a question raised by Nuani from Union Bank, and it's a very pertinent question. I studied it some more and I want to share this with you. In addition to what I responded last Tuesday, the question was, how do we evaluate a technical analysis or project technical analysis? Nuani, is it correct?
Yes, yes.
Right. Okay, there are few ways now. First thing is, Nuani asked whether we can go by the consultant's report of the client. Yes, because if the consultant is established and we have his credentials, then we can accept it. That is one way. If the consultant should be a known consultant who has done consultancy, and we should accept it. Right? Also, if it is done by an experienced company. Now, if the proposal comes to us from an experienced company in that sector, like we say Windforce, you would have seen Windforce going for a IPO, and they are only in renewable energy. Right? So if they come up with a proposal for a solar power project or hydropower project or wind power project, if they have experience, then we can take their proposal serious. But still we have to check whether this the cost is reasonable. Then you can then this is if big banks are having project finance divisions and they have experts in those project finance divisions. Now I have mentioned to you when I was heading project finance at HNB, I had an expert in hydropower and all manufacturing businesses. Then I had another expert now who is the head of actually AGM corporate banking at HNB. He was specialized in tea industry, and we were giving a lot of tea industry roles, and he knew tea industry in and out. Right? So when you go for an inspection, he knows what to ask, he knows how to analyze. Right? So for big banks, they will have sector specialists. Even DFCC Bank had, I told, aquaculture specialists. Right? When they did prawn farming, they know how to evaluate it. And then the project cost. Because we can accept their technical report, sometimes they may make the project cost more than what is actually will be to reduce their equity. So there are thumb rules we will discuss later, like per cost hotel project, per the cost per room. Okay. For hydropower project, 1 megawatt, how much it costs approximately. Right? Those are thumb rules. Then the other way is you go for a syndicate loan. If it is a big loan, syndicate loan, all the banks, their knowledge is combined. Right? And then the lead bank will do the analysis and other banks also will contribute. But no, no one asked this question because small banks have a problem because they can't ask the client to spend on another consultant, right? And small banks, what they can do is can join a bigger bank as a joint loan, not a syndicate, maybe joint loan. This happened, I will give an example. When, have you heard about Mr. Moscovy Prelis? Mr. Moscovy Prelis? Anyone has heard about him? Mr. Prelis was, I think, the first CEO of DFCC Bank, right? And he brought DFCC Bank from very small bank to a very big bank in the country, right? And DFCC, a development bank at that time. After he retired, he was invited to be CEO of NTB Bank. NTB was starting new. I think he must be second CEO. I can't remember. So he joined NTB Bank. Now, Mr. Prelis knew that HNB we were doing project finance. So former staff member of DFCC and NTB approached Mr. Prelis for a hydropower loan to NTB. So what Mr. Prelis did was invited HNB, because we have experience, to join with them so that NTB can do a hydropower loan. So, and that was UK investors were there. This person brought in, and they did first project in Ratgama, and that company is Pan Asian Power. Now Pan Asian Power, that promoter is no more there, but Pan Asian Power is a listed company, and it is doing well. Okay, so I have asked him to share his experience with all of you, how from a development banker, project financier, he became a project promoter and a owner of a power company. Right? So we'll try. He's in his home is in Kandy. Now he's into agriculture in Dambulla. Right. Now there was a technical problem last time. The recording is not there. Last time recording is not there, but we had about 27 participants, and therefore, but Mr. Menaka, the coordinator, wanted me to go through it for people who are not there. Today they have started the recording, so we'll see. We'll go through last time feasibility studies, maybe 15 minutes, and get into today's lecture. Today we are going to do actually theoretical lecture. I have already started writing some of the information there, right? So feasibility studies we went through last time, and I shared while doing the presentation, I shared the feasibility study done for solar power project called Naga Hydro. And I have changed the name of the company because if not, it will be identified. So feasibility studies you do before you start a project. And all of you, for your assignment, have to do some type of a feasibility study. There will be two assignments. First assignment is preparing a project proposal for a bank loan. Right? So you will have to start that, and I have invited NDB Vice President Project Finance, Ishani Palya Guru, and she will on 19th she will explain to you what are the requirement for when the bank gets a project proposal, what they look for in a project proposal. So she will be doing that presentation on 19th from 7 to 8 p.m. And now feasibility study, we said feasibility study should have executive summary, and executive summary should cover all the aspects of the project, major advantages, drawbacks, and chances of implementing the project. And it should cover the project background and history. And now project background is how the project came into being, like we discussed how projects start with the conception. So how did the project start? Now in this that Naga hydro project, Naga solar project, we discussed because the CEB floated the tender for 61 megawatt projects all over the country, connected to 30 transformers, not transformers, they are 30 power stations, right? So that they can get actually 20, and they will connect 3 to each switch yard and to generate power. Okay. And the project background, project should be described in detail, right? And the sponsor's background and the reason for their interest in the project. Then the market and plant capacity. This feasibility study, what I'm sharing is for a manufacturing entity. So that's why market and plant capacity, even for solar project, we need the capacity. So what is more important is the market, and we discussed earlier as well. You have to start from the market and then go to the other areas, right? So you study the market size, how to penetrate the market, what will be our market share, right? Then based on that market share and sales projections, the machinery capacities and production program will be made. And the final step at this stage will be you decide on the production, investment outlay, and sales revenue based on the market study and the market sales forecast. It is difficult to do long presentation in short time. So materials and inputs, right? So feasibility study has to cover the materials and input, whether they are available or how they are going to be obtained, and the supply chain, right? So when the material cost, how to arrive at the material cost, all these things should be discussed at the in this stage. So we also decided there is a close relationship between the definition of input requirements and other project formulation stages, such as definition of plant capacity, location and selection of technology and equipment. Now, that project I mentioned with HNB and NTB Finance, that machinery was imported from UK. I thought still now machinery are imported from China, but I checked with some developers. They are saying still they are bringing down machinery from Europe, Austria, all these places, because those machinery are good, long term. There is not much maintenance, so they prefer to go for European machineries some developers. That is their strategy. Some developers go for Chinese machinery and have a very good maintenance team, so that they will maintain their machinery in an excellent manner. Then location and site. Where to locate it? Is it close to the market? Is it close to the raw materials? Right? Or is it close to where the labor is available? So that feasibility study should select, decide on several locations, discuss what are the advantages, and decide on the location. Now that's Nagasola project we discussed. They had to accommodate in Mayangal because that's what TB has given, and they have been given how to connect to the main grid as well. Then scope of the project: supply of inputs, delivery outputs, and provide ancillary infrastructure investments. And we had to look at all these things to check the availability and the cost. Then this comprehensive approach should help to determine which investment have to be undertaken by the investor or any third party. Some infrastructure facilities, we have to find out whether the investor is going to make the investment or third party like CEB or Pradya Sabha, RDA, all those things we have to find out at this stage. And most of the time, I think that the investor should finance, because these government agencies will ask investor to finance. So initial layouts are prepared, and based on that, subsequent engineering work. So when the scope of the project is understood, the following should be determined: the appropriate technological processes to be employed. I took Tokyo Cement example, going for an expansion project, and the type of extent of machinery and equipment required, and they have to think what is the capacity required and go for the machinery, and the cost of technology and equipment involved. And then the cost of construction, various structures, civil works, right? And the overhead cost. Calculate overhead cost, and you divide the plant into different 3 sections: production, service, administration. For it will make easy to calculate the cost, and maybe even during the operations, then you can monitor the cost. Then manpower. So you have to, the feasibility study should include various levels of management, production, and other related activities. Then you go for the negotiations and contracting. Before the implementation, you start the negotiations for contracts, maybe civil contract, machinery supplies, then the project design, construction, and startup. You design the project, do the construction, and start up the operations. Now feasibility study is to plan properly. If not, you can just have an idea and you start construction without any feasibility study, right? So if this not planned properly, implementation stage will be having a lot of problems: cost overruns, time overruns. So implementation planning is to get the financial implications of the implementation phase. Right? During the implementation phase, what will be the cost involved? So after that, you know the project cost. How do you finance? Right? And you need to know until completion of the project and beyond the start of production. I think someone asked a question. In the project is completed, then why we said no, project is completed after the objectives, but after the project is completed, because of the loans are taken, equity is taken, you have to look at the process after the project is completed as well. So financing, how you do equity or loan, and financial implications of investment delays. Because sometimes if the loans doesn't come on time or the equity doesn't come on time, project can get delayed, and then the cost of the project will increase. So implementation, during the implementation phase, a series of simultaneous and interactive investment activities take place with different financial implications. So all these things should be shown in the feasibility study. So the project preparation should be for financial and economic evaluation, and you calculate the total investment cost after doing all these things. And we assume the project financing is available at feasibility stage. So the financial implications are calculated and including the total production cost. And projects also should be evaluated from the aspects of their direct and indirect effects on the national economy. Now, that solar project, it is direct impact on the national economy, because we are going towards renewable energy. I saw recently the energy minister has said they are not going for any other energy sources other than renewable energy in the future. So the renewable energy is very important for the economy, because the cost of fuel can be saved, but we have to look at the mix of that is done by electrical engineers in CEB, and the what is that institution they closed down when they came to the government. The Public
Utilities Commission.
One? Public Utilities
Commission.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Is it closed? I think they didn't close down finally. No, I think that may be there. And they changed the chairman and directors, and now it is, I think, in operation again. Okay. No, that is. I'm sorry. I have to rush through when it is not very good when you rush through a proposal. And most of you who were there last time, it will be again repeat, right? So we'll go to today's presentation. It is on financial management. Today, I may not be able to share much of my experience because this is a lot of theory. So what is corporate finance? Now you are going to start a business. Now all of you are going to prepare a project proposal because you are going to start a business, right? So you have to answer 3 questions in some form or another. You have to answer 3 questions. So what long-term investment should you take on? You are taking a business. So what are the long-term investments you take on? That is, what lines of business will you be in, and what sorts of buildings, machinery and equipment will you need? So there is capital investment. What are the capital investment you are going to make? Then second thing is, to make that investment, where are you going to get the long-term financing? So will you bring other owners, other shareholders, or will you borrow money? Then the third question is, after you start the operation, how do you manage your everyday financial activities? Like that is the collecting from customers and paying suppliers. So these financial management decisions are called the capital budgeting. The first question concerns the firm's long-term investments. So the process of planning and managing firm's long-term investments is called capital budgeting. So capital budgeting is process of planning and managing firm's long-term investments. Then identify investment opportunities that are worth more to the firm than their cost to acquire. Now there is no point investing in a thing which is more costly than what you get the return, right? So we have to identify opportunities which are worth more than what it costs. So that is a difficult part. So what is capital budgeting? Capital budgeting is the value of cash flow generated by an asset. It's not capital budgeting, we discuss capital budgeting. So the value of the cash flow generated by an asset exceeds the cost of that asset. So we say, take for example, we invest in a project 100, right? So when you are investing, it is negative, and you get cash flows 30, 30, 30. So in this case, what do you think is the value of cash flow generated exceeds the cost of the asset?
No.
No, yes, it is. And we have discount as well. Even without discounting, it is 90 cash flows and minus 100 is right. So sometimes if we have 50, and depending on the discount rate,
Discount, yeah.
we might have this will have positive net worth.
NPV.
Yeah, positive NPV. Thank you. Right. So, and we are not only looking at how much cash we are going to receive, right? And when it is received. Now, if we receive this after a long time, then again it is not worth this 50 after 50 onwards, right? So must be concerned not on how much cash they expect to receive, but also when they expect to receive and how likely, right? That is the risk. How likely they are to receive it. Now all these are projections. So we may receive it, we may not receive it. So how likely to receive it also very important. So evaluating the size, timing and risk of future cash flows is the essence of capital budget. Evaluating the size, right, timing, that is which year, and the risk of future cash flows is the essence of capital budgeting. Then the second question is for the financial manager. For the financial manager is how the firm obtains and manages the long-term financing it needs to support long-term investment. So it is called capital structure or financial structure. Now we take this example, this 100 is there. So how are we going to get this 100? Maybe equity 50, debt 50. So that is the capital structure that the finance manager has to decide. So it is a mixture of long-term debt and equity firm uses to finance its operations. So capital structure, finance manager has two concerns. How much should the firm borrow and what mixture of debt and equity is the best? Now, debt and equity, you can't say this is the best debt and equity, right? So, and the debt and equity mixture, I think last time, that is I think in some other class I did, when you have more debt, you get more return to the investors, right? Then when you have more debt, you have higher risk. So you have to decide on the mixture chosen, and mainly infrastructure projects. Now, like hydropower or solar power, wind power, you can have a higher debt because your cash flow is can predict easily if you generate power. So then you can have a higher debt. When you have a higher debt, you have a higher return on equity. But when you have higher debt, you have higher risk factor also. So you have to balance. And then finance manager has to find these expensive sources of funds for the firm. So there is a lot of flexibility for the firm to decide on the finance structure. And we cannot say one structure is better than any other, but that particular firm should decide what is the capital structure they are going to use. Then the working capital management. The third question concerns working capital management. The phrase working capital refers to firms' short-term assets such as inventory and its short-term liabilities such as money out to suppliers. So managing the firm's working capital is a day-to-day activity that ensures the firm has sufficient resources to continue its operations and avoid costly interruptions. So if you don't have adequate working capital, what will happen? You cannot buy your raw material because you don't have money. You may not get credit because you are not paid on time for the previous supply, right? So you will have a problem in your operations. So it is day-to-day management activity. I think the bankers know how firms come for temporary facilities, all these things, because their working capital management has got affected. And working capital management involves number of activities. How much cash and inventory should we keep in hand? We should not keep too much cash also with us because then it doesn't bring any return. Now the banks have this problem. The banks, branches, if you keep a lot of cash in the vault, then the bank doesn't get return on that. And when HNB got a risk manager first time from outside, what he did was he told branches, this is the maximum you can have in your vault, depending on the size of the branch. Right? So that is, if not just cash in the bank, without giving loans, will not bring any return, or it should go due to the central bank as a loan. Then should we sell on credit? And if so, what terms will we offer? And to whom we will extend them? Yeah, yesterday I was discussing with a consultant. He was saying that they do work, and when they didn't follow up collection, he's an engineer, because then one of his clients had told, if you don't follow up, you may not get your payments. So he's now following up, but he cannot be going too harsh also on the client, then he may not get work in the future. So we should decide to whom to give credit and how we are going to collect it. And how will we obtain any needed short-term finance? We can purchase on credit, that is short-term financing, because we don't spend anything, like we are getting a loan to buy the material. Or we can, without purchasing on credit, we can borrow short-term and pay cash. Sometimes that may be better because then you can get at a lower price. So if you are borrowing short-term, and how and where should we do it? So those things. Today I was listening to, we had the Association of Professional Bankers, Sivaganathan Memorial Lecture. Dr. Vijayawardena was the speaker. He was giving some examples how, because the banks were not supporting some customers, they had to go for informal borrowing at a high cost and get into trouble. Maybe I'll share those experiences later, Mr. Dr. Vijayawardena. Dr. W.A. Vijayawardena. He's as you may know, he was former Deputy Governor of Central Bank, and he writes a weekly column in the Daily FT, and It is critical of the government policy as well. Okay. Now this diagram shows the cash flow between the firm and financial market. First is financial market invest in firm issues securities, and financial market invest in the firm. And that money firm invest in assets. So starting with VA, they get money from the financial market after issuing securities, and that money they invest in assets, right? Assets, current assets and fixed assets. Then they generate cash from assets. So they have assets. We say again, solar power project. They invest in solar power assets. They get cash flow from the assets. So this cash flow comes out from the firm, and part goes as dividends to the investors. Okay, and part goes to the company again as retained cash flow, and part goes to the government as tax. So that is the cash flow between firm and the financial markets. For some of you, this is maybe very basic things, but I have to cover for everyone, so bear with me. So what they say is that in the figure 1, it is illustrated. Financial market, also like any market, is just a way of bringing buyers and sellers together. So in financial markets, it is what is sold and bought is debt and equity securities. Now we have a look at, we are today learning on the balance sheet and the profit and loss account a little bit, so that all of you have some idea of it. Very basic learning. So balance sheet is a snapshot of the firm. So what it shows is that's a financial statement. There are financial statement, balance sheet, profit and loss statement, cash flow statement, all are financial statement. And the balance sheet is a financial statement showing a firm's value on a particular date. Right? So it is a convenient means of organizing and summarizing what a firm owns, that is assets, what a firm owes, that is its liabilities, and the difference between the two, the firm's equity. Right? Difference between assets and liabilities, the firm's equity at given point in time. So some companies try to like do a makeup, because it's a they know end of the year the balance sheet looks good, so the balance sheet is made to look better. Financial statement showing a firm's accounting value on a particular date. But that balance sheet shows the value, but not the market value. It shows the accounting value. So left-hand side lists the assets of the firm. Right-hand side lists the liabilities and equity. So now most of the balance sheet, that is called horizontal system, and now have vertical system. You have assets and the liabilities in the same way and in the same level, on the vertical way. So what are the assets on the left-hand side? Fixed asset is one that has a relatively long life. The difference between current and fixed assets is one that have a relatively long life, and current asset is less than 1 year. Fixed assets can either be tangible, like property or vehicle, or intangible, such as trademark or patent. And the current assets has a lifespan less than 12 months. What are the current assets? Inventory. Normally, inventory is purchased to be sold within 1 year. Cash and the accounts receivable, that is the debtors, money owed to the firm by customers. So all these are current assets to be recovered within 1 year. Even long-term loans, which is to be paid in the coming year, will be put in as current assets. Let's current liabilities. Sorry.
Current liabilities.
Yeah, sorry, current liability. Thank you. Current liabilities have a life of less than 1 year. They must be paid within 1 year. Those are accounts payable, and that loan I mentioned earlier has to be paid within 1 year. Long-term loan also, if part of the loan which has to be paid within 1 year comes as a current liability. Then long-term liabilities, debt that is not due in coming year, which is long-term. Loan that firm pays in 5 years. So these are long-term liabilities. Then shareholders' equity. So the difference between the assets and the liabilities, that the assets is current and fixed, and the liabilities current and long-term, is shareholders' equity. So assets are equal to liabilities plus shareholders' equity. The net working capital. The difference between a firm's current assets and its current liabilities is called net working capital. So net working capital is positive when current assets exceeds current liabilities. So based on the definition of current assets and current liabilities, this means that the cash that will become available next 12 months exceeds the cash that must be paid over the same period. So net working capital is usually positive in a healthy company. And illustration is given here. You have current assets and the fixed assets, the total assets. On this side, you have current liabilities, long-term debt, and shareholders' equity. And the difference between current assets and current liabilities is net working capital. And in project financing, we have to calculate the net working capital with the capital cost, so that it should be financed from the long-term loans. So we have a example, building the balance sheet. Very simple example. Firm has current assets of 100, net fixed assets of 500, and short-term debt of 70, and long-term debt of 200. What does the balance sheet look like? So we'll just put it on the board. So we'll have the assets on the left-hand side and the liabilities on the right-hand side. So what is the first thing? Current assets. Current assets is 100. And fixed assets 500. Fixed assets 500. In total assets, $600. This side, liabilities and shareholders funds. Short-term debt of 70. So current liabilities is 70. Then long-term liabilities Long-term liabilities is 200. So it's 270, but you have to balance here 600. So shareholders' equity is
30.
330. Huh? 330 is. So what is the net working capital in this? So shareholders' equity 330. We'll go to the next sheet.
Okay. Yeah.
Did you say anything? Someone? Okay. Total assets 600. This side total liabilities and shareholders fund 600. Net working capital is current assets minus current liabilities is 30. We have another example. I have written part of that on the board, on of the balance sheet. I will write the balance, and then if it is there on the board, it will be easy. If not, we have to go back and forth. Liabilities and owner's equity. 2018 and 2019. Current liabilities. Current liabilities is accounts payable 232 and 266. Notes payable 196 and 123. Long-term debt 408. Equity 600, 640. Retained earnings 1320. And total these two is 2756 and 3112. Don't know whether you can see the last line. Okay. So we'll go to the next slide. So what we have given here is a simplified balance sheet of a fictitious company. The company is called US company. assets are listed in order of the length of time it takes for them to convert to cash in the normal course of business. So current assets are there on top and the fixed assets are there lower. Similarly, liabilities are listed in the order in which they would normally be paid, right? So current liabilities will be paid first, and then long term, then owner's equity. The structure of assets for a particular firm reflects the line of business that the firm is in, and also the managerial decisions about how much cash and inventory to have, and about their credit policy. And fixed asset acquisition, all those things can be seen from the balance sheet. The liability side of the balance sheet primarily reflects managerial decisions. So liability side reflects managerial decisions about capital structure. We said capital structure, debt and equity, capital structure, and the use of short-term debt. Now 2019, long-term financing was how much? Long-term financing was 454, and we can say equity also long-term financing 2,269, 2,723, right? Long-term financing is long-term debt plus equity. And the long-term debt 454 divided by the total long-term financing is, that is 454 divided by 2,723. 454 divided by 2,723 is how much? You have to keep your calculators also with you. 16.67. What do you think of this company? Long-term debt to total long-term financing is 16.67. That is, leverage is very low. Loans are very much less than compared to equity. Okay. This reflects capital structure decision made in the past by the management, right? So that their capital structure is low debt and more equity. So when we are examining a balance sheet, we have to keep three things in mind. That is liquidity, debt versus equity. Now we just calculated debt equity ratio, and the market value versus book value. This gives the book value, and we have to compare with the market value. And we look at the first component, liquidity. So liquidity refers to speed and ease with which an asset can be converted to cash. So liquidity is like water. That's why liquidity says. Water flows very easily. So if a company can convert to cash easily, then that company is liquid. So the liquidity has two dimensions: ease of conversion and loss of value. We can get cash fast if we sell at a very low price, right? But that is not the liquidity portion. You have to get at a fair price. You should be able to sell. Any asset can be converted to cash quickly if we reduce the price. So highly liquid asset is one that can be quickly sold without significant loss of value. Now, there was a time before this COVID, some luxury cars cannot be sold, right? They cannot be sold for their market value. The people are asking for a low price. Right? So I was trying to sell my car, and then I did not get any offers. But after COVID, after the government restricted import of cars, I was able to sell my car for a good sum, right? Which was not available few months earlier. So that is, vehicle is not a liquid asset. some vehicles can be liquid assets, some makes, but luxury vehicles are not liquid assets because people will buy new cars rather than used cars. So high liquid asset is one that can be quickly sold without any significant loss of value. So illiquid asset is one that cannot be quickly converted to cash without a substantial price reduction. Sometimes even with price reduction, you can't sell it. So, and liquidity is valuable. The more liquid a business, the more liquid a business is, less likely it is to experience financial distress. Now, even COVID situation, if they were liquid, they were able to manage. If not the government, you have to get the government that loan moratorium and interest moratorium, capital and interest moratorium, all those things, because if not, the liquidity is affected. Now, if you are not liquid, you have a difficulty in paying your debts or buying needed assets. So unfortunately, liquid assets are generally less profitable to hold. I said earlier also, if you hold cash, then you are very liquid. But if you hold too much of cash, then you don't get any return on that cash. Okay. If you keep in the bank, you get savings rate, or maybe what is that other little high interest rate giving money market rate, right? Okay. So they just sit there, the liquid assets, but don't bring in any cash. So you have to balance it, liquidity and profitability. So we'll stop. It's exactly 8. Stop for 15 minutes and start after the break. Any questions before that? Right. Okay, then we'll take a break. Right. We have. Do you know each other? Have you seen the syllabus, all of you? You got the syllabus, huh? Right. Okay. And I think if in the physical class, we'll get to know each other, and then there can be interaction in this online. I hope you can see other participants, no, in the who have joined the class, right? Okay, so see you at 8:15. Are you all there? So we now we discuss liquidity. We go to debt versus equity. So when someone borrows money, the company borrows money, it gives first claim to the firm's cash flow to creditors. So the equity holders get the residual value. So shareholders' funds are equal to assets minus liabilities. Now, if the firm sells assets and pays its debts, whatever cash is left belongs to the shareholders. All of you know that's why the banks get the first claim to the assets. Right? After you sell the assets, the lenders get the first claim, and the balance will go to the equity holders. So the equity holders are entitled to residual value is a portion left after creditors are paid. It is called shareholders' equity. And this is true in accounting sense and economic sense. Accounting sense also, shareholders' funds are assets minus liabilities, and it is in economic sense as well. So use of debt in a firm's capital structure is called financial leverage. We have discussed this. More debt a firm has as a percentage of assets, the greater the degree of financial leverage. So debt act like a lever, right? So when debt is more, the financial, if we are doing well company, then the return on assets will be high. So it can magnify both gains and losses, not only gains. If the company is not doing well, the losses also will be high. So use of debt in a firm's capital structure is called financial leverage. Then financial leverage increases the potential reward to shareholders. It also increases the potential for financial distress and business failure. So debt is like a sword with cutting on the both sides. Right? So it will increase the reward to potential shareholders, and it will also increase the financial distress and business failure and the higher risk. So is the book value in the balance sheet same as the market value? No. I'm asking the question. Is the book value in the balance sheet same as the market value?
No.
No. Thank you. So it is done according to accounting standards, historical cost of assets shown. According to accounting standards, only the historical cost of assets shown. That's why when you have buy a share, say price to book value, right? So the price is the market value, book value is according to the financial statement, the balance sheet. The income statement is it's called financial statement summarizing a firm's performance over a period of time. Now the balance sheet is a snapshot. Income statement is summarizing a firm's performance over a period of time. Normally it is 1 year. So revenue minus expenses is income. So the first thing reported in income statement would be the revenue and expenses from the firm's principal operations. Subsequently, other financing expenses such as interest paid is included and the tax paid are reported separately. And the last item is net income, or it's expressed as earnings per share. So we in the market, capital market, share market, always we are checking earnings per share, how much earnings per share. Then we look at dividends per share. From the earnings per share, they declare dividends per share. So we look at the same company, the balance sheet is there. Now the income statement. Right? Income statement also will just dot down. Income statement, net sales. Net sales, cost of goods sold is 750. Depreciation 65. So EBIT, earnings before interest and tax, is equal to 694. Interest is 70. So the taxable income $624. Taxes 212. So net income, that is net profit after tax. Net income is 412. So from this, addition to retained earnings, is 309. So from 412, put it back to the company, 309. Dividends 103. Dividends 100. So there will be some calculation. Will need these figures, right? And I am not an accountant, so you will have to help me to teach this balance part. Okay. So calculating earnings and dividend per share. Now we assume this company has 200 million shares. All these are in millions, and we assume 200 million shares at the end of 2019. That is end of 2019, 200 million shares. Based on the income statement above, what was earnings per share? What is the earnings per share? And what were dividends per share? Right? So you tell me and I will write down. Okay. What is the, so I can't do that. Actually, I thought I will take these calculations out and give the notes. Now it is there. Earnings per share is, you take the net income, right? You take net income 412 divided by number of shares 200. So $2.06 per share. So earnings per share or EPS normally we use is $2.06. Dividends per share, you divide 103 by 200, 103 million by 200 million, you get 51 cents and half per share. So 0.551 per share. So that is the earnings and dividends per share. Now, in we normally work on cash basis, right? But in the accounting, it's accrual principle. Income statement will show revenue when it accrues. Can someone tell what is the accrual principle? Okay. Accrual principle is not when the cash comes in. We can sell something on credit and the cash will come maybe next year, but we are taking that sale into our accounts. This principle means that revenue is recognized at the time of the sale. So it need not be the same as time of collection of cash. Costs shown on the income statement are based on matching principle. Now we say income statement net sales 1,509,000. Now cost of goods sold will be matching that sales, right, to manufacture that item worth of 1,509 and the cost of goods are taken. As a result of the way revenue and costs are realized, the figures shown on the income statement may not be at all representative of the actual cash inflows and outflows that occur during a particular period. So, the income statement, it doesn't show actual cash flows for the particular period. It shows the based on accrual principle, net sales, cost of goods sold, and on that basis the net income. So cash flow. Cash flow is one of the most important pieces of financial information that can be screened from financial statements. We can say some company can be doing lot of profits, that is, there have been scams like that as well. They show a lot of income, but that income has not realized, and that provided on accrual basis. So if it doesn't come, then you're in trouble. But cash flow is very important because it shows what cash has come in during that period. So by cash flow, what is meant is the difference between the number of rupees that came in and number of rupees went out during a year or a period. So if you are an owner of business, you may be very interested to know how much cash you took out of the business. Some people, when they do a business, they take money out, but that is not very good practice because then you don't know how much the business generates. So cash flow from assets is equal to cash flow to creditors and plus cash flow to shareholders. What we generate from assets, we pay to creditors and the shareholders. So the total of cash flow to creditors and cash flow to shareholders considering of the following: operating cash flow, capital spending, additions to net working capital. So we'll study each of these: operating cash flow, capital spending, and additions to net working capital. Now, operating cash flow. So to calculate the operating cash flow, we would calculate revenue minus cost. Then we don't want to include depreciation. Right? So EBIT is not cash flow. So we have to add to EBIT depreciation because depreciation is a non-cash item. Then from that we have to deduct taxes. So tax is a cash item. So we take earnings before tax 694 from here, then add depreciation 65 and deduct taxes 212. We get operating cash flow 547. So this US company operating cash flow is 547. So we have to find out of this 547 operating cash flow, how much we are reinvesting in the firm. Then capital spending. Net capital spending is just money spent on fixed assets, less money received from sales of fixed assets. So net capital spending is when we buy fixed assets, we spend. When we sell fixed assets, we get cash. Right? So the difference between money received from sale, money spent on buying of fixed assets, and money received from sale of fixed assets. So at the end of 2018, net fixed assets was 1,400. At the end of 2018, net fixed assets was 1,644. Right? At the end of 2018, net fixed assets 1,644. At the end of 2019, net fixed assets 1,709. So we deduct from ending net fixed assets beginning net fixed assets, that is 1,644, and we add depreciation. Now, the net fixed assets would have been 1,579 at the other. That is, now we have in 2018 total fixed assets 1,644 and depreciation is 65. So if we deduct depreciation from 1,644, 65 depreciation, it will be 1,579 at the end of the year. But we have 1,709. That means we have invested in fixed assets. So ending fixed assets minus beginning net fixed assets plus depreciation, we get net investment in fixed assets. 130 is our net capital spending for 2019. So $130 million is net capital spending for 2019. Could net capital spending be negative? I want the answer from you. Now, in this case, net capital spending is positive. Right? Can the net capital spending be negative? It can be negative because if you sell more assets than you buy, so then the net capital spending will be negative. You are not spending, you are getting cash. Clear to everyone? Then we had three things, no? Operating, net capital spending, and additions to net working capital. Now, additions to net working capital. Now we look at current assets. End of 2019, we have current assets 1,403. End of 2019, we have current assets of 1,403. And end of 2018, we had current assets of 1,112. So during the year, this company invested in 291 in current assets. That is, you deduct 1,112 from 1,403, you get 2,000. You get 291 of difference, right? So we have invested 291 in current assets, and we have to look at similarly current liabilities. Current liabilities is total end of 2018 428, 2019 399. So the easy way to find is we look at ending net working capital and deduct beginning net working capital. So ending net working, what is net working capital? Current assets minus current liability. So 1,403 minus current liabilities 399, right? 389. Yeah, 89. So 389. So divide 389, you get 1,014 ending net working capital. The beginning net working capital is 1,112 minus 428. That is the current liabilities in 2018. You get 684. Then the additions to net working capital is the difference between that. That is 330. So net working capital has increased by 330. So in other words, company had net investment of 330 in net working capital for 2019. Clear for everyone? Okay. So we go to the next page. So we have now calculated. We calculated operating cash flow 547. Right? Operating cash flow 547. Then we calculated capital spending 130. Right? And this net working capital 330. So for operating cash flow, we have used for capital spending 130 and additions to net working capital we have spent 330. So what is remaining is cash flow from assets 87. Operating cash flow is equal to net capital spending, additions to net working capital, and cash flow from assets. Okay. So cash flow from assets is 87. Now this 87 should be equal to the firm's cash flow to creditors and cash flow to shareholders. Okay. So we got those figures earlier, cash flow to creditors and cash flow to shareholders. We calculate cash flow to creditors and cash flow to shareholders. We have, how do we get interest paid? From the income statement, we know to creditors we have paid 70. Right? And net new borrowings. So how do we get new borrowings? the difference between this 428 and 389. Am I correct? Net new borrowings. Yeah. So it comes to that's current liabilities. We have to get 454 minus 408. Okay. Long-term liabilities 454 minus 408 get 46. So net new borrowings is 46. Then cash flow to creditors is 24. So interest, we have paid interest 70. We have taken a new loan 46. So cash flow, net cash flow to creditors is 24. Then cash flow to shareholders. We know dividends paid 103, right? New equity raised. We have to check that in the equity. So in 2018, it was 600. Now it is 640. End of 2019 in the balance sheet. So new equity is 40. So we have paid dividends 103, but we have received, the company has received new equity 40. So cash flow to shareholders is 63. Now when you add 24, the cash flow to creditors and cash flow to shareholders, you get 87. It is same as cash flow from assets. So cash flow from assets of 87, paid 24 to creditors, 63 to shareholders. So, any questions? I think very simple for the bankers, and there are some accountants as well, and it will be basics for them. Right. So now when a company begins life, they don't have assets or liabilities. Then the company raises 10 million from an entrepreneur in order to start a factory to produce face masks. So they don't have anything. They're starting a face mask factory and raises 10 million from an entrepreneur. Another 10 million, then that means 10 million is known as share capital or equity capital, and the entrepreneur has shares in the company. Right? I think you can remember that diagram we had. When cash come to the company, then company issues securities. So the entrepreneur has shares and company has cash of 10 million. Now this mask company require another 10 million to start production. So what can they do? They can get another 10 million from an investor, same entrepreneur, or go to the bank and borrow 10 million. So we say we borrow this capital from a bank on a long-term loan. So this capital is called debt capital, and 10 million came from entrepreneur called equity capital. Then the company invests this 20 million in the total capital, invest the total capital in buildings, the production facility, and getting production started. Right? They invest this 20 million in building the production facility and getting production started. So there are different components to this investment. The one component is company acquires buildings and equipment that are used in the manufacture of the product. Right? So they invest in assets. It acquires some equipment that is not used in the manufacturing process but required for the business. So you don't invest only for the manufacturing process, you invest maybe office furniture or some other buildings, right? So you invest in some equipment that is not used in the manufacturing process but is required for the business, and it purchases stock of the raw materials that are used in making the product. So the production equipment, then some related construction, related investment, and then invest in raw material. So item 1 and 2 are called fixed assets. which we have here in the fixed assets are item 1 and 2. Item 3 is called working capital. So the company uses the capital to invest in fixed assets and working capital in order to begin business. So there is a dual nature of transactions. The company raises initial equity of 10 million from the owner. The owner provided cash in exchange for share ownership of the company. So company receives 10 million, owner gets 10 million worth of shares. So that's dual nature. So you all are familiar with dual control. The company raises 10 million as a loan from the bank, and this increase the cash assets and increase the amount of money the company owes to others, all liabilities. So it is increasing the cash assets by 10 million and liabilities will be 10 million. And uses this cash from the owner and the bank to purchase equipment. So assets minus liabilities is equal to equity. We already studied it. This is some to show this transaction. Before the transaction, before you started the company, there was nothing. Right? After transaction, we have cash assets and equity. That is, after the equity investment, 10 million in cash and 10 million equity in the balance sheet, equity and liability side. Then the next transaction is 10 million loan. Right? Then before the 10 million loan, you have cash 10 million and equity 10 million. After the transaction, you have 20 million cash and you have 10 million loan. Right? It's on the other side and the balance sheet. Then again, you have this that coming down there. Before transaction, cash 20 million, loan and equity 10 million each. Then after transaction of buying plant and equipment, you have the plant and you will have cash also, you need some cash as well. And you have the loan and equity on the right hand side. So that is simple depiction of the transactions. So assets is equal to liabilities plus equity, other way around. Assets minus liabilities is equal to equity. Then assets are equal to liabilities plus equity. The accounting equation in this form expresses the idea that all the assets of a company are either owed to lenders or belong to owners. So this equation, assets equals liabilities plus equity, gives the idea assets belong to lenders and equity owners. So the assets have a claim against them either from liabilities or in the form of claim by the owners. So if the business of the company was stopped today, all the assets sold, the proceeds of the sale will be distributed to company's lenders and the company's owners. So the term on the right hand side of the equation can be called claims. I think we can remove this. This is equal to liabilities plus equity. This can be called, this right hand side is claims. Claims on the assets. Those are claims on the assets. So when the company is in production, now we are going through that process of the company, starting with the equity, loan. Right? The production, it spends money on acquiring all the materials and services that are needed to make and distribute its products and sells these products to customers. So the difference between total sales and total cost is called the gross profit. So we have this gross profit is here actually without the depreciation, gross profit. Or sometimes the gross earnings or gross margin. So we call difference between total sales minus total cost is called gross profit gross earnings or gross margin. And then the company must pay interest on any loans that are outstanding on the debt holders. So that is what happening here. Company is paying 70 million interest to the debt holders and pay tax to the government authorities before declaring a net profit. So before declaring dividends or anything, you have to pay taxes as well. The interest payment is deducted from the profit prior to performing the tax calculation. So interest is deducted. That means when you are paying interest, because of that, tax will come down. The interest portion is tax deductible. So that's why it is said, if you have a higher loan, then you have a benefit because of the interest component is tax deductible. So amount of profit is after interest and taxation is called profit after tax, net income. Part of the profit can be paid to shareholders as dividend and part is retained in the companies that we looked at, that we retain profit and the dividends. So retained portion of the profit allows the business to maintain the operations at the same level of profitability. You know, if you declare everything as dividend, the company will not have enough money to grow. So it can grow operations if only you put some money back to the company. So profit is a feedback loop. The company is meeting customer needs, controlling costs. So how do your company sell sales come to selling things to customer needs, to satisfy customer needs, then control cost, and as appropriate mix of funding from owners and lenders, the profit should be sufficient to maintain operations. So if the company is doing this excellently, there should be sufficient funds to expand operations. As a result, profit is a prime measure of the effectiveness of a business and its management. So now we discuss how to evaluate management capability. So when the management or CEO starting a business, we have to see what they have done in the past and whether they were profitable. So that is one indication that their management was good. This is again graphic interpretation. Each year we do this. We have income statement for a period and cash flow for the period and the balance sheet for that snapshot, right, for one day. Then again year 2, year 3, it continues. This is depicting the operations of the company, and it starts similar one we discussed earlier. Start now this capital source of OSINC. First with capital provision. We get from shares, common stock, preferred shares, debt, and we get capital to the company, right? One. Then what will happen? That capital will go for capital investment, property, plant and equipment, working capital for the project. From that, after the project is completed, we start the operations of the project. So from the operations, we get sales. We do sales and we get cash. And we have cost, we spend cash. From that, we get gross profit, right? Sales minus cost, gross profit. And from the gross profit, we pay interest, right? After the interest, we get profit. That is sales minus cost, minus depreciation, minus interest. Okay. And the depreciation goes this way because depreciation is a non-cash item. Okay. And the cash goes this way. From that, we pay tax. And after the tax, we get the funds here. Net cash flow. That is sales minus cost, minus depreciation, minus interest into 1 minus T. Net cash flow is we pay tax, You pay, multiply by T, that will be tax. 1 minus T is the net cash flow, the net income plus depreciation, we get net cash flow. Right? So net cash flow from the project come to this capital source or sink, the cash. From there, we declare dividends. Right? And repayment of loans and interest and other investments. So these are some equations used in that chart, that diagram. You can go through and see whether you understand. And if you don't understand, you can ask me next time. And we have come to the conclusion of our discussion time. Normally the question time. Any questions where we all of us can learn? Anyone has a question? Nuvani, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Any questions, Nuvani?
Didn't come anything to my mind.
Fun?
I didn't get anything into my mind.
Okay, right. Yeah, last time you asked, I should not be texting you, then you might not ask questions. So we'll ask someone else. I think I like all of you speaking, so that keep it only my voice will make you actually boring. Sandamali, you have any questions?
Sir, no.
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 Shanaka, I think first, I think you asked a question.
I have a question, sir. Now, there are ways that these guys are complicating things like intercompany or hiding there. So it's better, I think, if we can discuss about those things. Yes,
Okay. Yeah, actually, that doesn't come for project finance, because
Yes.
we have to have a separate company to do project financing mainly. It is done within the company only. We have the problem.
Yes, sir.
I am not a specialist in accounting to explain that to that level.
Okay,
So are you listening to news also, son?
sorry, sir.
Right. At home, others have to listen. No, so you are studying, they have to listen to news.
Yes.
That's what you are saying is very important. That comes in the commercial lending, mainly commercial or corporate lending. You have to identify where how they do these intercompany transactions, and we know because of that. Now even Selenco Group, when it went down, because now I am a director of Ceylon Development, we are still having some. We have given guarantees to banks for Selenco companies to borrow, right? And then still we are trying to get those guarantees cancelled or to recover from that Selenco companies, and it's very difficult. And most of the things from 2009, this company Ceylon Development has been doing is going for legal cases against some Selenco companies. Even that restaurant, what is that, Akasakade or something?
Rajabodhu.
Rajabodhu. They have some, we have given money to them, and we have been recovering very small amounts, and I don't know whether they are paying now. At least Are they still on operation? They were in Duplication Road in Liberty Plaza. After they had to leave from Ceylon Towers. So that type of transactions is actually not very good because it affects the companies in Sedenco Group. What happened was when the chairman tell you to do something, the CEO, then they will do that. They will give that. Luckily, Ceylon Bank was rescued by the government action by taking over the bank, asking insurance company and Bank of Ceylon and some government entities to buy shares. And they, if not, the banking system would have also collapsed. So we will not discuss, Shanaka, those things because there is
Yes, yeah, it's not relevant. Yes.
Project finance. Yeah.
Okay.
But thank you very much. You ask questions that make us think. Anyone else want to? I would like to hear some voices. That I want to tell you that introductions last day will be next Tuesday, and if you don't introduce, then you lose marks. Because if you have seen in the syllabus, you will all will have to make presentations. Then I will give the subjects and we will give times, and you will have to make presentations. Because listening to me only you can't learn, right? You have to make your own presentations and you have to learn. Now that's why we have the assignments, the two assignments. One assignment is preparing project proposal. The second assignment is preparing the loan application, right, for a project. So all these things for you to learn, and if you don't do that, you won't learn. So you have joined this program to learn, so we all learn, right? And I want all of you to learn and become very good project financiers, because projects are very important for the country. And if we don't provide project loans to people who are coming for project facilities, and if we don't do it productively, then the country will suffer. Okay? So someone disturbing us, I think Indika Pereira.
Yes. So I have one question. Actually, I just want to clarify.
Okay.
So, at the very beginning, you told that it is better to have expertise. I mean, in the project financing division. So
Yeah.
you name few people as in, hydropower, tea, and all those things. Suppose you don't have that much of expertise in your department. So is there any other way? Or so suppose we can discuss with other banks, and we can mix our knowledge, experience. So other than that, is there any other way?
Yeah, that's what I think I discussed in the that for big banks, now when we set up HNB Project Finance after I joined 1995, we didn't have staff. I didn't have only NDT qualified people in the SME department. What I said was, I want to, like DFCC and NDB, I want multiple qualified people in the project finance. So we recruited engineers and scientists, graduates for the project finance. Right? And that's why I was able to get them in-house expertise, right? But as Nuwan was last time, a small bank can't have that expertise, right? So one way is you join with another bank, like I gave this NTB, HNB, hydropower financing.
Indication.
Bank which is having experience and work with them. So then you can get the other bank's experience to share with you, right? Other one is the syndicate loans. When you do a syndicate loan, you are the main bank, the lead bank, and other banks will combine and put in their knowledge together, right?
Okay, sir. Understood. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Indika, asking for that question. And okay, then we'll conclude for the day. I thought I'll be completing early, but again, good timing, all of us. Good night. See you on Tuesday.